This is the newest member of Hyundai's full power N brand. This is the Elantra N, and we're at Atlanta Motorsports Park to put this thing through its paces.
This is the brand new 2022 Hyundai Elantra N. It's the newest N car, and I think it might be the best. Namely because, well, it's got more than 3 doors, unlike the Veloster N, and you can get it in a stick, unlike the Kona N that we're also testing here in Atlanta this week.
Now, just because it has more than 3 doors doesn't mean it's completely uncompromising. But before that, let's start where we always do, under the skin.
I'm gonna sound a little bit like a broken record, but under the hood here we have the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that you have in every N car. It's good for 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. But it's not even the full story.
Those are the max power figures for manual equipped cars. Cars equipped with the DCT get NGS, N Grin Shift, which is good for an extra 10 horsepower, but it comes with a catch. You only get that extra power for a few moments, and then you have to wait until the system recharges itself, so it really is intended almost as something like a DRS in Formula One.
Now me personally, I'll gladly leave that extra 10 horsepower to go for the 3-pedal manual transmission. The engine itself doesn't seem to need that extra 10 horsepower. I mean, it's a perfectly punchy engine. It's got plenty of power, lots of pep, real good low-down torque, 1500 RPM is where you get your peak torque figure. It stays flat at the top, and then when you're hitting on it, it'll rev all the way up to just under 7,000 RPM, and you've got power all the way up there.
But, as we've mentioned a million times on Downshift, power isn't everything.
Now I know I'll generally always prefer the manual transmission, especially in a car like this. To get the most out of it, to get the full experience, I feel like you really should get the manual. However, that's not to disparage the DCT, the automatic transmission option in any capacity. That is still a great gearbox. There's a lot of drama, a lot of theater. It snaps shifts, it's quick, it's crisp, it's sharp, the programming is fantastic, and if you can't drive stick or don't want to drive stick or drive a lot in traffic, the dual clutch it's a great option.
Especially when you consider the sounds that fly off this thing. The crackles on downshifts, sharp and aggressive upshifts, and when you lift off the throttle, the car will make all sorts of noises to make your inner 8-year-old sing.
So it's got good power from the engine, it's got a really fun and engaging transmission, but this thing needs to drive well. It needs to get that power to the ground. And how does it do that? But it sends power to that front axle. It's front wheel drive exclusively, but you have an electronic LSD up front. You have an eLSD managing your torque split, and you've got Hyundai's what they call N corner carving differential. And it's pretty good. This thing bites in, and I never feel like I'm wasting traction or torque or power in any way.
Sure, it's wrong wheel drive, and if you're looking to do skids, then something like the new 86 might be more your speed. But if you're looking to convert power into performance and lap times, then this is an absolutely phenomenal partner.
And then another important ingredient for any sports car, performance car, whatever you want to call it, is steering. And not just the accuracy, but the communication that the front tires give you. And I have to say, the steering rack on this thing is fantastic. It's electrically assisted, but I think it's because of the grip for the Michelin PS4S tires up front. Going through that torque vectoring LSD, it translates everything that my tires are doing. I know if I can put more load into them. I know if I need to back off in a corner. I guess, in simple terms, I'll put it this way. You can tell that the guy that used to run BMW's M Division, yeah, he's been all over this car.
The last thing, then, is the chassis and suspension. A soft chassis can undo all the great work the steering or engine does, and the same goes for a poorly tuned suspension.
And it's good news on both counts. Generally, the tendency with something like this is to completely overspring the dampers and make it feel really, really stiff and rigid because it's a track car or a track-focused car. And that kind of ruins the ride on a day-to-day basis. And they haven't done that here. The chassis itself is rigid enough. It's a great chassis, and they added that strut tower brace on the rear to improve rigidity, torsional rigidity by 29%. And you feel it, you really do. And then, when you talk about the actual springs and dampers, the suspension setup, it's really good. You have adaptive suspension on a sub $35,000 car. You can tailor it back to be very comfortable, driving yourself to work, to school, to the grocery store. And then when you really want to get on it, well, you can dial it up. Man, this thing is a blast. It's so much fun to shift too. It's so rewarding. You have auto rev matching if you don't want to heel toe, or if you're just kind of lazy. It's just a good car. I love this thing. Can't believe this thing really starts at $31,900. Really, the only options that you can get are the paint colors. You have 5 paint options, and 3 of them are free, with the only ones that you pay for being this white and the performance blue. The rest of them are free, so the only other option then is what transmission you want. And you can get the dual clutch, which adds like $1,800, and with the dual clutch you do get a sunroof, which is very nice. So this thing still comes in at like $33,000 or under $34,000, and it's just amazing that you can get something with this performance level at a price like that. Now, stylistically, it's very geometric, it's very in your face. I think this probably could use a body color wrap. That's just what I would do if it was mine. But it looks pretty good. You've got your N stamping here. Don't like red trim? Too bad. You're gonna get it on every trim, which to me I guess is fine. Then moving around the side, you have these upgraded N wheels. These are again the only wheels that you can get. You've got your red N brake calipers peeking out underneath. Michelin PS4S tires, very, very good. Behind that, you've got your side skirt. Again, red N, very, very typical. It does look like the Hulk has punched this thing in the side, but I personally like it. The wheelbase itself is longer than you would get in the Veloster and in the Kona, which makes this thing actually ride both on track and on the road a lot more refined, a lot more sophisticated. And then around back, again, what you get is very Hyundai, it's very N. You have an interesting full-width LED tail bar. You've got Elantra scripted out, your N logo. You have a really cool spoiler up there. Again, you've got your red accenting down beneath your bumper, and then you've got your dual outlet exhaust, and it sounds very good. But let's step inside. And then inside the Elantra N, it's great in here. It's not like Rolls-Royce level, design or materials or anything, but this thing is like 30 grand, so it shouldn't be. The design is fitting of the personality. It's very cockpit driver oriented, but you have your typical differentiation and different fabrics and materials in here. It's pretty decent. It's simple, it's black, it's subtle. You do have some blue N, kind of like Hyundai's N color for this brand, strewn about the cabin. From a design perspective, the only weird thing I think is this little area to the left of your gauge cluster with this circle and the line through it. I'm not really sure what that is. I actually asked during the conference and they said it was an aesthetic choice. So like it or don't, but it's here. But then speaking of that, of course, right next to it is your actual instrument cluster, your gauge cluster. It's fully digital, and you have all sorts of customizability depending on your drive mode, your N modes, your custom N settings, and that sort of thing, which is really nice. And then next to it, you have your digital touchscreen, your infotainment system, and again, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, wired, but you do get your performance readouts. You can see engine temperature, oil temperature, and what percentage throttle you're inputting, and like a lot of that fun stuff that you would use potentially if you're going out on track. Under the screen, then, you have hard buttons to control your infotainment system, and you have hard physical buttons to control your HVAC system, which is, again, really, really nice to have, that you don't have to go through a screen to access those things. Then you have your actual shifter. In the manual, you will have a manual that doesn't light up, but it is a nice and engaging and notchy shifter. Of course, you've got your drive modes in front of that, and you've got a button for your parking cameras. And then in front of that, you have some hidden charging options. You've got USB, two USBs, excuse me, a 12 volt, as well as a wireless charging pad. The steering wheel itself is the same as it is in the Kona and the Veloster. You've got your two custom N buttons that you can program for you and your partner, or if you're feeling zippy one day, or if you're wanting to relax a little bit more. And then since I'm in the manual here, I just have a rev button, where if this was a DCT car, you would have that NGS button, that overboost function. But you don't get a flat bottom, but it's nice and leather wrapped, and you have that blue stitching and an N logo at the bottom of your wheel. The seats themselves, they're comfy, they're very bolstered though, and the seats light up, which I think is incredibly cool and just kind of like a fun little tidbit. They are manual, but this is, again, like a $30,000 car-ish. And the interesting thing is, if you get a manual equipped car, you will not get a sunroof. If you get the DCT, you can get a sunroof in this thing, and you can't even get a sunroof in the Elantra, or the Kona N. So that's kind of nice. And then in terms of the rear seats, they are bigger than the Veloster N, and they're actually bigger than the Kona N. You have decent space back there. And if you had a sunroof, it would kind of break up and bring in more light for this black interior, making it feel quite a bit bigger, especially because if you're going to be sacrificing that cargo space with that strut bracing, you'll have, you know, a bigger back seat to actually put people. And then speaking of the trunk, it's big. It's big enough. It's about 5 cubic feet smaller than the Kona N, but it's plenty big for basically a normal sedan of this size. You do have that strut tower bracing to firm up the chassis that we talked about. That's that red bracing, adds another 25 or 29% torsional rigidity. It's very good, and that's why it's there. But you will, okay, so the bracing doesn't actually impede in terms of cargo volume, because the seats do still fold, but it's like if you want to put in something like a big TV or something like that, you just have to be conscious that you won't be able to put larger, bulkier items up through past the rear seats. But with that, let's talk about the final thoughts.
So there it is, the new Elantra N. The charm of this car is the theater that you get. A GTI might be nicer on the inside, and a WRX has all-wheel drive. But when it comes to the drama and enjoyment of the car, there's just something about these N cars that have so much character. And it's for that reason that I think if I were to actually put my wallet on the line for an affordable, fun car I could drive every day, it would undoubtedly be this Elantra N. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the Kona video.